If you've seen your doctor to check your testosterone levels and you're told that your testosterone levels are normal, but you still feel like crap, you feel exhausted, you don't have the energy, the focus, the motivation, the sexual drive that you used to have, well, maybe you're not crazy. Maybe there is something there. Even though, again, I understand you were told your testosterone is normal. I'm here to tell you today that this might not be the end of the story. My name is Dr. Adam, and I specialize in men's health, especially testosterone and hormone optimization. And in this very important video, we're going to talk about the difference between what's normal and what's optimal. This is a problem that I see every single day. People come in and they have all the classical problems associated with low testosterone. Again, these are things like low energy, poor recovery, low libido, low sexual function, less motivation. They're not able to put on muscle despite they're working out at the gym. Sometimes muscle aches and joint pain. But again, they went to see their doctor. They finally convinced their doctor to check their testosterone and were told that the levels are normal. But sometimes these clients know that something is still missing. And in some cases, they start to do more investigation. And in some cases, I end up seeing them and we look a little bit further and see that even though they were technically normal, they were far from where they should be. So, how can that happen? Well, let's start by looking at what's normal in testosterone. And here's something that might actually surprise you. What's normal can differ from one lab to another. In other words, you can go and get your labs tested in one lab and get a certain number and be considered normal according to that lab. But if you went that same day to a different lab in the same city and got the same exact number, that number can be flagged as low or abnormal. And again, it's the same one, but just because you went to a different lab. Let me show you what I mean. If we look at Quest Diagnostic, for example, just based on a quick search, they consider 250 to 1100 to be the normal values in men over 18. If you look at LabCorp, it's actually 264 to 916, so slightly different. Now, if we do a quick search on Healthline, here it's saying healthy male testosterone levels are going to range between 450 and 600, with the low being below 300, according to the American Urological Association. We're looking at Mount Sinai and it's saying 300 to 1,000. So, 290 would be considered normal according to Quest and LabCorp, but not according to these numbers from Mount Sinai. If you are looking here at the University of Rochester Medical Center, we also have slightly different numbers, 270 to 1,070, depending on age. Baptist Health, again, we're 300 to 1,000. Point is, even though all these ranges are similar, but they're not exactly the same. There isn't really a consensus about what's a normal testosterone. But the bigger point I want to make about these numbers, if you look at all of these numbers, you can see that it's a very wide range. So let's go back at Quest, 250 to 1100. If you have a testosterone of 250, that would be considered normal if we are using this range as a reference. But imagine we are able to increase your testosterone by a whole 50%, another 125 nanograms per deciliter. So that would give you a testosterone of 375. In fact, imagine we are able to double your testosterone to 500. Imagine we are able to triple or quadruple your testosterone from 250 past 750 and up to 1,000. Well, we quadrupled your testosterone. You used to be at 250 and now you're at 1,000. And both of these numbers are normal. But do you think you're going to feel the same? Do you think you might feel a little bit different if your testosterone was 4 times as much? Again, they are both normal, but you might feel very different at these two numbers. Now, my point here is not that everybody has to be at 1,000 or that we have to quadruple your testosterone no matter what you're starting with. My point is simply your lab values falling within a reference range is not the end of the story. We have to investigate a little bit more to see if your testosterone is good where it's at, or if we should try to improve it to try to make you feel better if you are suffering from some of the symptoms that could be associated with low testosterone. Now, you might be asking yourself, why is this reference range so wide and why is it different from one lab to another? And part of the reason is these labs, what they do is they look at a sample of a population and they look at they do a statistical analysis to see where most of the people fall. And as long as you fall within that range, then you are considered, to have normal lab values. Now, when it comes to testosterone, I think this is not the best way to look at it, partly because there's a lot of men who are suffering from low testosterone. And again, these could be considered part of the sample. And one other thing to consider is many studies have shown and suggested that the testosterone levels have been declining with time. In other words, somebody who used to be 50 years old, 40, 50 years ago, would have on average much more testosterone than a 50-year-old person nowadays. In other words, the testosterone levels have been declining in us as a population in general. Another thing to consider is somebody might feel fine with a testosterone level of 300 or 350 or 400, but somebody else might not. If you always kind of had a higher testosterone and then your testosterone declined dramatically over the last 5 or 10 or 15 years, or even over the last 6 months or last 2 years, you might notice a difference that somebody else who has the same level of as you might not notice. So let me give you an example. If somebody comes in and their testosterone is at 300 or 350 and they feel great, they have all the motivation they want, their sexual life is great, their energy, their sleep is fine, they're not having any issues there, we're not going to be like, oh no, we have to increase your testosterone, we have to get it to 800 or 900 or 1,000. No, they feel great at this level. There's no reason to touch their testosterone. But if somebody else comes in and their testosterone is at 300, they feel like crap and they've always had higher testosterone, for example, and now they do certain things to help them increase their testosterone to 500, 600, they might feel a lot better. Even though 300 was normal and 600 is also normal, but the way they feel is very, very different. I personally believe that the fact that we have accepted this very wide range of testosterone levels to be normal, and the fact that we sometimes tell as a society men who fall within that range that their testosterone is never the issue and it's not what they need to be working on, is part of the reason why so many men feel like life is just wearing them out, and so many men now feel exhausted, feel like they've lost their edge. They're not where they know they could be. And again, sometimes we start looking at the wrong thing because we believe that it can be our testosterone. Our testosterone is normal. And again, I'm here to tell you that this is not always the case. Just because your testosterone falls within that normal range, especially if it's in that lower side of normal, that doesn't mean that it's perfect and that there's nothing to improve there. In fact, a lot of times when you do increase those levels, and there's a lot of safe ways to do it that we're gonna discuss in other videos, but a lot of time when you do improve these levels, you'll start to see that many of these symptoms will start to improve and will start to go away. This is why I'm so passionate about this subject, and this is why this is what I do for a living. So I hope that this video brings your attention to this very important subject, because most of the men that I work with don't just want to fall within an accepted range of normal. They want to be living at their optimal health, at their optimal level. And that word optimal, optimize your levels, I think it's a word that's been overused so many times, so I don't like to really use it. But I do think this is one of the places where it is the appropriate word to use. You want to have optimal levels of testosterone, not just normal levels, especially again with everything that we've talked about so far. I hope you found this video to be helpful. If this is something that you are interested in, make sure to subscribe. I'm going to be making a lot more videos about how to improve and optimize your health, testosterone and otherwise, because there is also more to the story than just testosterone, but I do think it's a very important part of the story for many men. So make sure you like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.